Some. Ethan Cole woke up at 5:30 every morning. Not because he wanted to, not because he loved early mornings or felt excited about the day ahead. He woke up early because it was the only time the world felt calm enough for him to exist in it, without feeling like a burden. He made his coffee in a chipped blue mug, stood by his small window, and watched the town of Ashford Ridge slowly come to life. Cars rolled out of driveways. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The morning light touched the rooftops gently, the way it always did, indifferent to whoever was watching. Ethan was 26 years old. He had lived in this town for 3 years, worked at the Ashford Ridge distribution warehouse for 2, and in all that time, not a single person had ever asked him how his day was going. Not genuinely, not the way people ask when they actually want to hear the answer. He was not the kind of man people noticed. He was average height, with dark eyes and plain features, and a quiet manner that made him easy to look past. He wore simple clothes. He did not speak unless spoken to. He did his job well, kept his head down, and went home. That was his life. Clean, organized, lonely. There was one thing about Ethan that was not ordinary. On his right palm there was a mark. It had been there since birth, a raised symbol that looked almost like a crown with branching roots growing downward from it. He had shown it to doctors as a child. One called it a birthmark. Another called it a rare skin condition. A third told him not to worry about it. He had stopped worrying about it. He had stopped thinking about it at all. Until the day it started glowing. It began on a Wednesday. Ethan was in the break room at the warehouse, eating a sandwich he had packed the night before, when Director Grant Harlow walked in with 3 senior staff members. Harlow was tall and well-dressed, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never being told no. He was also Ethan's supervisor, and he had a particular talent for making Ethan feel invisible. "Move the Tuesday shipment to Thursday," Harlow said to one of the men beside him, not looking up from his phone. "And somebody fix the temperature in Bay 4. It is like standing inside a freezer." He walked to the coffee machine. He looked around the room. His eyes passed over Ethan, the way eyes pass over a chair or a potted plant. Completely, without any recognition at all. One of the senior staff, a man named Brees, laughed at something Harlow said. Then Brees looked at Ethan and said, still smiling, "Do you actually work here?" "I keep forgetting you exist," the others laughed. Harlow did not laugh. He did not defend Ethan either. He simply poured his coffee, turned around, and walked out. And that was somehow worse than the laughter. Ethan looked down at his sandwich. He was not angry. He was used to this. What he felt was something quieter and harder than anger. It was the feeling of being erased, slowly, one ignored glance at a time. Then he felt warmth in his right hand. He turned his palm over and stared. The mark was glowing. Not brightly, not in a way that filled the room with light, but there was a soft, golden pulse coming from beneath his skin, steady and slow, like a heartbeat. He stared at it for 3 full seconds. Then he pulled his sleeve down over his hand and sat very still. Nobody had seen it. He was sure of that. But across the room, a woman named Sierra Vance had been filling her water bottle at the sink. She had not been looking at Ethan when it happened, but she had felt something, a pull, a pressure in the air, like the moment before thunder. She turned around slowly. Ethan was already covering his hand. His face was calm. His shoulders were tense. Sierra stood at the sink for a long moment. Then she walked back to her desk without saying anything. She sat there for the rest of the afternoon, thinking. Sierra worked in human resources. She was organized, careful with her words, and very good at her job. She was also a wolf. Not the kind of wolf that people told stories about, with sharp teeth and dramatic transformations under a full moon. She was simply a person who existed in 2 worlds at once, as many in Ashford Ridge did, quietly and without announcement. The wolf world had its own rules, its own structures, its own leaders. At the top of it all, above every regional alpha and every pack elder, there was supposed to be an alpha king, a single bloodline, ancient and unbroken, whose authority was not given by vote or force, but carried in the blood itself. The mark of the Alpha King was said to appear on the palm of the true heir. It had not been seen in over 30 years. Sierra had heard stories about what the mark looked like, a crown with roots, golden light. She pulled Ethan's personnel file that evening and read it twice. There was almost nothing in it. a home address, a start date, a note that said he had no emergency contact on file. Before that, a gap in records that stretched back to early childhood. No family history, no hometown, nothing. She closed the file. She sat in the dark office for a while. Then she started watching him. Over the next several days, Ethan noticed things that he could not explain. Animals in the parking lot, stray cats, pigeons, a fox that had no business being near a warehouse, seemed to drift toward him when he walked past. Electronic equipment near his station glitched more than usual. And the older men in the warehouse, the ones who had always been cold to him, now seemed to go out of their way to avoid being in the same room as him. Not rudely. Almost nervously, Harlow, meanwhile, became harder on him. He gave Ethan the worst shifts. He criticized his work in staff meetings over small things. One morning, he stood in the middle of the warehouse floor and told Ethan, in front of everyone, that his inventory counts were sloppy and that if he could not improve his performance, there were other options available. Nobody came to Ethan's defense. Nobody even looked at him. But Ethan noticed that when Harlow said those things, his jaw was tight. His voice had a thin, sharp edge to it that seemed less like frustration and more like fear. The mark on Ethan's palm was glowing more often now, mostly at night, mostly when he was alone. He would sit in his apartment and look at it and feel a strange combination of confusion and something else. Something that might have been recognition, as if a part of him had always known this was coming and had simply been waiting. On the fifth night, he felt a pull toward the eastern woods. He had walked past those woods every day for 2 years and had never felt any particular interest in them. But that night, the pull was strong enough that he put on his jacket and followed it without fully deciding to. He walked through the dark streets of Ashford Ridge, turned onto the unpaved path beside the community park, and kept walking until the trees closed in around him. He walked for about 10 minutes. Then he found the clearing. It was small and perfectly round, as if someone had cleared it deliberately long ago. In the center was a large flat stone, and carved into the stone was a symbol, the same symbol that was on his palm, the same branching crown, the same exact shape. Ethan stood very still. His hand was blazing gold now, brighter than it had ever been, and the light fell across the stone and made the carved symbol look like it was glowing too. He felt something in his chest, deep and solid. Not fear, not excitement, something older than both. "You found it faster than I expected." He spun around. An old woman stood at the edge of the clearing. She was small, with white hair and calm eyes, and an expression that suggested she had been waiting here a long time, and was not in any hurry now that he had arrived. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. "My name is Marin," she said. "I keep the records. The old ones." She looked at his hand. "You are not lost, Ethan. You were hidden. There is a difference." "Hidden from what?" he said. "From people who would have been afraid of you," she said simply. "People who had good reason to be." She did not say anything else. She walked back into the trees and was gone before he could follow. Ethan stood in the clearing for a long time, looking at the stone, and then he walked home. The next morning, Sierra sat down beside him at lunch. She did not make small talk. She did not pretend this was a routine check-in. She folded her hands on the table and looked at him directly and said, "I need you to show me your right hand." He looked at her for a moment. Then he opened his palm. The mark pulsed softly in the fluorescent light of the break room. Gold, warm, steady. Sierra let out a slow breath. "Do you know what you are?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I think I am starting to." She told him everything. She told him about the wolf world, the packs, the alphas, the hierarchy. She told him about the Alpha King bloodline, ancient and unbroken for generations, the highest authority in the entire wolf world, not because of power alone, but because of something that ran deeper. She told him that the mark could not be faked or transferred. It appeared on one person in a generation, and only on the true heir. The last confirmed carrier disappeared 30 years ago, she said. Before his child was born, the Elder Council hid the child among ordinary people to keep him safe. The records were sealed. She paused. "Your records have a gap, Ethan." He was quiet for a long time. He looked down at his palm. The mark was still glowing, soft and patient. "My whole life," he said slowly, "I have been the person that nobody notices. I have walked into rooms and had people look straight through me. I have done good work and been ignored for it. I have been told, without words, every single day, that I do not matter. He paused. And now you are telling me that some of those people, some of the ones who looked through me the hardest, they could feel something in me they were afraid of? Yes, Sierra said. He nodded once. He did not look angry. He looked like a man who had just understood something that had been confusing him for a long time. Then I am not going to hide anymore, he said. 3 days later, Elder Marin issued a formal summons to the Alpha Hall. It was an event that had not happened in decades. Every regional alpha in the territory was required by ancient law to attend, along with the Elder Council. Harlow tried to block the summons through 2 allies on the council. The Elder Council overruled him in less than an hour. His allies, it turned out, were not as loyal as he had believed. On the morning of the summons, Ethan put on a plain dark shirt and his regular jacket. Sierra had offered to help him prepare a speech. He had declined. He said he did not want to perform. He just wanted to be honest. Elder Marin met him outside the Alpha Hall, a long stone building hidden beneath the eastern ridge, its entrance concealed behind a wall of old oak trees. She gave him a sealed envelope. Inside was a document, his original birth record, protected by the Elder Council for 30 years. His father's name was there, his mother's name. The bloodline, confirmed in the careful handwriting of 3 council witnesses. Ethan read it. He folded it. He put it in his jacket pocket. Then he walked inside. The hall was full. 30 or 40 wolves sat in rows on either side of a central walkway. Alphas and elders and senior pack members, all of them silent. At the far end of the hall, Director Harlow stood with his 2 senior enforcers beside him, his arms crossed, his face set in an expression of controlled calm. He had been preparing for this moment. He was ready to argue. He was ready to challenge every claim. Ethan walked down the center of the hall. He did not walk quickly or slowly. He walked the way he always walked, steadily, without drama. But as he moved further into the room, the wolves closest to him began to shift. One man near the front gripped the edge of his seat. A woman 2 rows back closed her eyes briefly. The biological response was not something any of them could stop. The mark on Ethan's palm was blazing now, clearly visible even through his jacket sleeve. A warm gold light that moved with his pulse. Harlow began to speak the moment Ethan reached the front. He spoke about the unreliability of old records. He spoke about the dangers of false claims. He spoke well, calmly, with the practiced ease of a man who had led rooms for years. Several people nodded along. Ethan let him finish. Then Ethan raised his right hand. He opened his palm toward the room. The mark did not just glow, it blazed white. Pure, clean, overwhelming light that filled every corner of the Alpha Hall and made Harlow's voice stop mid-sentence, as if the sound itself had been switched off. One by one, the wolves in the room went to their knees. Not because anyone told them to. Not because of any signal or command. Their bodies simply knew. The enforcers beside Harlow knelt first, then the alphas in the rows behind them. Then the elders, slowly, with the kind of dignity that comes from knowing something important is happening, and choosing to honor it. Harlow stood for a long moment. His face went through several things at once. Pride, resistance, something that might have been grief. Then his legs gave way, and he knelt with the rest of them. Ethan lowered his hand. The light softened. He looked around the room at all the people kneeling, and felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Something quieter. Something like sorrow, for all the years that had been lost, and a careful, serious understanding of what came next. I did not choose this bloodline, he said. His voice was clear and steady in the silent hall. And I did not come here to punish anyone. I came here to be honest. He paused. A child was hidden 30 years ago to keep him safe. That child grew up alone, without family, without history, without knowing who he was. The people in this room who sensed something in him and pushed him down instead of reaching toward him, I do not hate them for it. But I am asking every person here to think carefully about the kind of world that makes hiding a child necessary, and the kind of world we want to build from this point forward. Nobody spoke. The hall was completely still. I am not going to rule through fear, Ethan continued. I am not going to demand loyalty. I am going to earn it, the same way I believe any real leader earns it. Through honesty, through fairness, through showing up every day and doing the work. He looked at Harlow, who was still on his knee, his head slightly bowed. That is all I have to say." The Elder Council met for 3 hours after the summons. Harlow was formally removed as Regional Alpha. An investigation into his leadership over the previous years uncovered a long pattern of suppressing wolves below him in rank, controlling information, and using his position to protect himself rather than the people in his care. He was not removed from the community. He was offered a simple role, without authority, if he chose to stay. It was, everyone understood, a harder sentence than being sent away. Sierra was formally elevated in rank. It was not a reward. It was simply the council finally seeing what had been there all along. Ethan did not move into a large house. He did not change his apartment immediately. He attended his first Elder Council meeting the following Tuesday, and sat at the end of the table and listened more than he spoke. He asked questions that surprised the elders with their carefulness. He took notes in a small notebook. He went home at the end of the evening and made coffee in his chipped blue mug and stood by his window the way he always had. The town of Ashford Ridge looked the same as it always did. The streetlights were on. A dog was barking somewhere. The night was quiet, but something had shifted. In the wolf world, in the way the pack moved and breathed and understood itself, something fundamental had changed. There was an order to things now that had not existed before. Not a heavy order, not one built on fear or force, but something lighter, something that felt, to everyone who was part of it, like the feeling of a door opening, after a very long time, in a closed room. Ethan sat with his coffee and thought about his father, whose name he now knew. He thought about the child he had been, moved from place to place, belonging nowhere. He thought about all the Tuesday mornings he had walked into the warehouse and been looked through as if he were made of glass. And he thought about the mark on his palm, which was warm now, always warm, and which no longer needed to glow to be known. He was here. He was seen. And for the first time in 26 years, that was enough.